What we need is a radical overhaul of how our systems currently operate, and ensuring that we have that long-term vision of what this country will look like, what this world will look like, to keep us within 1.5 degrees of warming. I always see how politics, how the world, how economies operate as a pyramid. Let's make it an inverse pyramid. So that at the top we've got the environment. And the environment's there to provide food, shelter, water, and keep humanity alive. It's people who turn that environment into the goods and resources that create business and therefore create the economy. Any policy that doesn't recognise every single aspect of that is failing to have strong policy for the future. These transitions have been so much a part of our history, and I think that when we think of the future, we've got so much that we can be inspired by. Actually, even right now, inspiring things are happening. I'm from South Wales, and we currently have the Future Generations Act, which means that any policy has to be viewed through the lens of not just what it will do to the country today, but what it will do for the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. And there'll be those of you sat there going, what about the M4 relief road that's being debated in the Senate tomorrow, that will go through pristine habitat and potentially cause increase carbon emissions? This is exactly why that policy's been there, and it will be interesting to see how our Welsh Assembly members react to that, given the reports from the Future Generations Act. And even when you look around the world, I think you can look at places like Detroit. So Detroit was a booming city until just 20 years ago, and then in 2013 it was the biggest city to file for bankruptcy. And to me it was an absolute soup of everything that can go wrong in politics, from inequality, pollution, corruption from politicians. And after they filed for bankruptcy, the people of Detroit came together to work towards change. In Detroit, 50% of adults have asthma as a result of air pollution. In Detroit, people are having to work in toxic work conditions, working with environmental hazards and living in polluted neighbourhoods. People were moving away, creating an economic crash. There was sewage that got pumped into their rivers, and actually there was a very brief turnaround in their pollution monitoring when all of the ducks on their lake died as a result of the high percentage of pollution they were being exposed to. And people came together. The power of grassroots when governments don't act has to be acknowledged in any form of transition, because the people came together and they said, we want Detroit to be a clean and safe city. They describe themselves as everyday Detroiters working for environmental justice to help that helps Detroiters who are the most vulnerable to pollution. And they say, because we believe that environmental rights are civil rights. These changes, the grassroots, the power of grassroots change, can influence governments, can influence politics, and make sure that we are talking about the transition. But it's the government that will institutionalise that change for generations to come. And I think I've always been really inspired by the work that our councillors do across the country. And one of our councillors in Kirklees, actually, he looked at communities that he was working in, that were some of the poorest communities in the country, and they were facing fuel poverty, where people have to choose between putting food on their table and heating their homes. And they said, what we're going to do is put solar panels on the poorest homes in Kirklees to remove this choice. This is how social and environmental justice can be integrated together, how we can think about how we radically change how everything works to make sure that it works for people and the environment, because that just transition is so vital, and so for the success of what the politics of the future is going to look like.